But the thing about core trauma is that it is not damage to yourself. It is not something that breaks within you. It is the way that you form. So people will give you all kinds of advice, like just put yourself out there and go to therapy and heal from your trauma and be kind to yourself, be self-compassionate. But that doesn't work if you've got core trauma, because you can't go back in time and change things. So what can you do?
Hi, Dr. K. I was abandoned at birth and have problems with my adoptive parents. My adoptive mother says that my adoption was a mistake and that it would have been better if I died in an orphanage. I feel that these events still affect my life in many ways, and I'm trying to fix this, including with the help of my therapist. In stressful situations, I feel broken and unwanted. I feel no inner strength. Any criticism throws me off balance. In the most difficult periods, I am flooded with helplessness. I cannot speak or act. And with all this, I can't sympathize with myself and feel sorry for myself. When I try to imagine the time when I was abandoned, I get only slight whispers of pain, and then I lose a sense of my body and feelings. And the only thing that is left is a paralyzing fear that if I continue to dig, I'll face immense amount of pain. The therapist says that being abandoned at birth is the reason for all this. But I don't understand at all what can be done about this trauma if I don't remember these events. I can't go back to a time before the trauma. So my question is, what can I do about this trauma without having a memory of the event?
Okay. This is incredibly hard to deal with. So let's kind of go over a couple of the features that I think are really, really, really important here. So first we have the case of someone who was abandoned at birth, someone who was adopted, and the adoptive parents said, you were better off dead. Okay. So this is brutal. So then what happens is not only is there this problem, but then this person, so I want y'all to understand this. Okay. So these are events. These are bad events. But then these events create a human being who has been conditioned, right? To any time they encounter criticism, they feel helpless. They are unable to think or act, and they are unable to do things that we would normally expect humans to do, like be able to sympathize with themselves, be able to feel pity for themselves. And then anytime they try to explore, they get this very, very slight whisper of a feeling, and then they sort of lose sense of their body. They essentially dissociate. And they're saying I can't even recall the trauma because it happened so young. So this is what I would kind of call, I don't know if this kind of makes sense. I would call this core trauma. And what do I mean by that? So as a psychiatrist, sometimes we'll work with people who have something called PTSD. So this is post-traumatic stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder is when you have a human being who forms normally, right? So you have a nervous system, a cognitive system, an emotional system, a internal dialogue that is generally speaking healthy. And then what happens is you have a traumatic event which triggers neuroplasticity. So anytime we learn something, we are the hippocampus is one of the only places in the brain that continues to have neurogenesis. That's where we learn and we form memories and things like that. But we have a wiring which then gets altered. But the thing about something like PTSD, is that it is an alteration of a pre-existing wiring that is relatively healthy. There are several patients that I've worked with that I would say that I would call it core trauma. So CPTSD is a good example of this, but I think CPTSD is a particular kind of what I would call core trauma. And here's how I would define core trauma. Core trauma is not even trauma, right? So trauma implies, if I say that I have been traumatized, there is an object which gets damaged. But the thing about core trauma is that it is not damage to yourself. It is not something that breaks within you. It is the way that you form, right? So if I make a statue and then I take a hammer and I break off a part of the statue and the statue looks like a normal human being and I knock off an arm, that is a trauma done to an object that is formed in a healthy way. The problem with core trauma is that when I pour the concrete, it forms in a particular way that is like not ideal, I would say. And there are a lot of things about this that are kind of like confusing to people, but this is the way that you are baked. It is baked within you. This is why when we look at trauma early on in life, it doesn't necessarily form PTSD. In fact, it rarely forms PTSD. Most of the time, what trauma does early in life is leads us to personality disorders.
Hey y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health.
And so we start by understanding what literally is meditation. How does experience shape us as human beings? How do we strengthen the mind itself as an organ? And so by understanding our mind, we understand a very, very simple tool, a crucial tool that we have to learn how to use if we want to build the life that we want to.
So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today.
Right? And what is a personality disorder? So let's talk about this, okay? We're going to be a bit technical because we got to be technical here. I want y'all to understand, this is definitions become important, okay? So remember that with trauma, what's going on is I get damaged over here, but the core of me is still intact. In core trauma, what tends to happen is while I am forming, I'm formed in different ways. And when people are traumatized when they grow up, they usually don't they don't develop PTSD. What they develop is often personality disorders. Now, that begs the question, what is a personality? What is a personality? Let's be technical about it. Let's be precise. A personality is the way that you perceive, react internally, and behave in a situation. So, for example, this is simple, okay? So let's say I take person A and person B, and both of them go into a job interview where the interviewer is disrespectful, right? The circumstances that you're in are identical in both of these situations. But the way that one person perceives that disrespect, and then one person has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and one person has, let's just say, secure attachment. So even though this situation is identical, one person, the NPD person, will think, oh my God, this person is trying to be mean. They're an asshole. They think I'm pathetic. They're trying to make me feel bad. And if y'all have, make me feel bad is a great example of how, wild the perceptions of people with NPD are. So if you're a normal human being and you deal with narcissists, what you'll find is you'll do a completely ordinary thing. You'll do something stupid, crazy. Oh, I went to a birthday party and I got a nice gift for my friend whose birthday it is. And the person with narcissistic personality disorder will come to you and they'll say, why are you making me look bad? You got them such an extravagant gift. I got them a less extravagant gift. Why are you making me look bad? They perceive your actions in a polluted way. If you're securely attached and someone is mean to you in a job interview, maybe you think, man, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe this person is just having a rough day. Holy crap. The way you perceive the world changes. And then this will lead to a variety of internal reactions. Let's have some compassion. Let's get angry and try to be insulting towards them. And then this leads to behavior. Actually, let's call it an insult the behavior. Now I'm going to insult them back and I'm going to ask, how was your day? So this is what personality is. It is the way that you perceive the world, the way that you react to what the world sends your way, and the way that you respond to it, right? Your internal reactions. So the problem with core trauma is that this is fundamentally altered. So this is not a problem with one part of you. This fundamentally changes the way that you perceive the world. And we sort of hear this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and play this again. And I want y'all to listen to the way that this person perceives, reacts, and behaves in the world. We're going to listen to the voicemail again. And this is the hard part, okay? So it's so easy to get caught up in how terrible these circumstances were. But if we want to help someone like this, if we want to understand this, we have to pay attention to this.
Dr. K. I was abandoned at birth and have problems with my adoptive parents. My adoptive mother says that my adoption was a mistake. And that it would have been better if I died in an orphanage. I feel that these events still affect my life in many ways. And I'm trying to...
Let's stop right there. In many ways, right? So this person's architecture of the way that they perceive the world. So that's why it's going to not affect in many ways. It's going to affect, if you have core trauma, it's going to affect every dimension of your life. And let's look at what those are.
This, including with the help of my therapist. In stressful situations, I feel broken and unwanted.
Okay, so now let's break this down. Stressful situation, right? Stressful situation. Let's say if you're healthy, you respond to stress. What's the internal reaction? Feel broken. It's not even that you've made a mistake. You haven't even screwed up yet, but you start by feeling broken.
I feel no inner strength.
No inner strength. Okay?
Any criticism throws me off balance.
Right? So this is also like criticism throws you off balance.
In the most difficult periods, I am flooded with helplessness. I cannot speak or act. And with all this, I can't sympathize with.
Okay, so then this leads to inaction, which is a form of action, by the way. So I don't know if this makes sense. Freezing, holding still is an act, right? So when I'm an animal and there is like, let's say like I'm a gerbil and there's a snake nearby, I'm going to freeze. That's actually an action. So freezing is an action.
Myself and feel sorry for myself.
Can't feel sorry for yourself, okay?
When I try to imagine the time when I was abandoned, I get only slight whispers of pain, and then I lose a sense of my body and feelings. And the only thing that is left is a paralyzing fear that if I continue to dig, I'll face immense amount of pain. The therapist says that being abandoned at birth is the reason for all this. But I don't understand at all what can be done about this trauma if I don't remember these events. I can't go back to a time before the trauma. So my question is, what can I do about this?
Okay, great. What can you do about the trauma? So we're going to talk about it, okay? Okay. So this sounds really bad, right? And let's be honest, it is. But there's a lot that can be done. And if we want to do the right thing, we have to understand like what's going on, right? So this is where like the simplistic explanation of, when the therapist says this is all due to your trauma, they're 100% right. And that feels really insufficient because you can't go back in time and change things. So what can you do? So what we want to do is, first of all, understand the architecture that we live with. And then we need to start modifying that architecture in a very like intentional way. Okay? So there's a lot of stuff here that this person says that they feel bad about, like, or that they, a lot of reactions that they have, which we may rebel against. I do not think that is a good idea. So this person says, I can't be sympathetic towards myself, and you shouldn't be. I know it sounds wild, okay? You shouldn't be sympathetic towards yourself. If you have a fear that there is something deep down there and there's a ton of pain, you are right. You are correct. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we have core trauma is that we start to assume that our path forward is using the solutions for people who have a healthy personality organization. So feeling sorry for yourself is really only something that works when you're like a healthy human being. And this is what makes core trauma so hard, is if we look at the way that a lot of trauma is healed, it is healed through new experiences, right? So if I have an anxious attachment style, one of the ways that I can heal that is through having a relationship with a secure attachment style. If I have core trauma, one of the best ways that I can heal that is by engaging with people who do not treat me like crap. And as I get new data, as my brain continues to learn over and over and over again, hey, people like me, people like, this is not so, like, I'm a decent human being, people are treating me well. The problem though is that here's what makes it this so hard to deal with, is that when you move out into the world, your attempts to engage in healthy behaviors will run into your personality organization. And your personality organization will interfere with the stuff actually healing you, right? So this is what makes it so hard. So if we say like, okay, if I have anxious attachment style or avoidant attachment style, what I need to heal is to have a relationship with a securely attached person. The problem is that when I get into a relationship with a securely attached person, my attachment style will sabotage the relationship. So the way that I kind of view trauma is I'm walking into a room and I'm looking for an object, but there's a light source behind me, and everywhere I turn, I cast my own shadow. So like, even though I'm looking for something, there's light there. Oh, there's light over there. That's where the object is. As soon as I start moving towards it, I cast my own shadow and put things into darkness. So whatever direction I move in, I like basically my personality structure and organization makes it really hard for like me to succeed. So people will give you all kinds of advice, like just put yourself out there and go to therapy and like, you know, heal from your trauma and be kind to yourself, be self-compassionate. But that doesn't work if you've got core trauma. Sympathy doesn't do anything for you. Practically, right? And the reason it doesn't do anything for you, the reason that you are wired this way is because you are wired for survival. So I want y'all to imagine when a child grows up in an environment where they're an orphan and their adoptive parents say that it was better off if you died instead of got adopted. How do you think that that child wires to survive, right? Sympathy doesn't get you anything. Inaction is actually protective. So when mom or dad says, hey, you should have died at birth anyway, and you say, no, I shouldn't. Or the child goes to school one day and you know, they do something really, really well. And a teacher says, hey, you did a great job, child. And then child goes home, is proud, shares their pride with their mother or father or whoever who's like a toxic fuck. And then toxic fuck says, you're never going to amount to anything. So how is this person forming? They're forming to be survival oriented, that the smaller you are, the more you just exist and you exist in a corner, the less notice you attract, the less drive you demonstrate, because demonstrating drive means like people will be aware around you, right? If you start doing something, people will be aware. And if they have a toxic attitude towards them, they're going to try to shut you down. This is why we have this response of feeling helpless right here, right? The paralysis, the inability to act or think. That is because acting or thinking helped you. It was your, inaction and not thinking helped you. And this is also where we get to dissociation. The moment that you encounter pain, I want y'all to understand this is really important. There's this principle called hemispheric lateralization, which is when the emotions in our right hemisphere get way too big, we cut off communication between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. We essentially, emotions trigger dissociation. And this is like really important. Dissociation probably happens to a certain degree in animals as well. So when you have an animal that is playing dead and trying to survive, and what'll happen is predators. So predators don't eat dead animals. And the reason they don't eat dead animals is because dead animals are full of bacteria and rot. We only want to eat things that are freshly killed because lions on the Serengeti don't have access to refrigeration. So one of the best survival strategies for animals is to play dead. Now, when you play dead, a lion knows on some primitive level you could be playing dead. So what does it do? It scratches you. It bites you. It tries to trigger a reflex. If it can inflict pain, then you will twitch. And if you twitch, I know you're alive, you're going to get eaten. So what happened is, this is some fascinating research on catatonia about this, where what the brain does to survive is triggers a dissociative response. Because if the emotions are too high, if the pain that we feel is like will trigger a reaction, what we actually want to do is shut down and freeze. So these are the responses that it triggers. So this is the problem, is that you're wired for a particular goal, which is to survive, not act, not build anything, not be healthy, not even care for yourself. That's not the goal. The goal is survival. Now, the problem with this is that once we try to fix this, things won't work in the same way. Like being nice to yourself, self-compassion, doesn't work. Like you're not worth being compassionate towards. You don't even know what compassion really feels like. You don't know what it feels like to receive compassion. You don't know what it feels like to give compassion. And that's not your fault. It's that if we sort of think about it, right, so we know that there are some critical periods of development for things like language. So if a human infant doesn't get exposed to language by a particular time, it's going to be incredibly difficult for that child to ever learn how to talk. Now, the good news about a lot of this trauma stuff is that this is not permanent. So you missed some of those key developmental milestones, which is going to make your life really hard, but it doesn't mean that you're screwed. It just means that The standard solutions that work for other people, like self-compassion, don't register for you because your brain doesn't know what it's like to feel compassion, and it doesn't know what it's like to give compassion. Because you know how to give things by receiving them, right? So now the question becomes, what do we do? And this is where what I see with people with core trauma is that they will try to move into the world. But as they try to move into the world, they sabotage their own efforts. And this is a good example. So this person says, when I feel criticized, I feel broken in some way. When there's a stressful situation, I have no inner strength. No inner strength, this is important to understand. This isn't no inner strength. This is a nervous system that has wired you towards inaction. It is going to actually make you feel weak. It doesn't want to give you strength. It says, when stressful, do nothing. This is our survival strategy. We become a turtle, right? So the turtle, like when a turtle gets attacked, it doesn't stick its flippers out, exert a lot of strength, and start like flapping its turtle flippers around. That's not what it does. That's not the right survival strategy. So this needs to be rewired. And the way that we're going to rewire that is really, really, really scary. But this is the axis that when I work with people who have core trauma, this is the axis that they usually really struggle with. But if I had to say in a nutshell, and if you guys, by the way, want a step-by-step process of how to do this, check out Dr. K's Guide to Trauma. I'll talk about it a little bit more, okay? But good, bad, comfortable, uncomfortable. So what I tend to find works incredibly well, basically like bird's eye view, is to move from this axis to this axis. People who are traumatized will ping pong between good, or people with core trauma, let's say, and bad. So they try to move towards feeling good and away from feeling bad. Makes a lot of sense, right? So what we tend to find is that people who have a history of trauma are more prone to addictions, will have more avoidance motivation. Now, that may sound like a weird phrase, because isn't avoidance the opposite of motivation? No. From a neuroscience perspective, you can be motivated to avoid things. And y'all understand this, right? We try really hard to avoid things. We will go out of our way to avoid interactions with certain people, places, or all human beings. And oftentimes what happens is when you have an issue of core trauma and you don't feel good on the inside, you will try to feel good. So you'll go towards things like dopamine, drugs, video games. So we're trying to move away from bad into good, which makes perfect sense. But oftentimes this gets us stuck. Now the next thing is, what should we do? And this is where I think the axis that we want to move from is comfort to discomfort. And when I work with people with core trauma, what I find is that things that normal people find good is what makes you uncomfortable. So with core trauma, here's what happens. We have all these scripts. We have all these reflexes: dissociation, helplessness, inaction, pushing you towards neutral, pushing you towards neutral, pushing you towards neutral, because what we know is safe. So here's the crazy thing. We look at this and we say, oh my God, this person, there's so much pity, so much pity, so much pity, right? Abandoned at birth, adopted. You better off if you died rather than got adopted. Now, I want y'all to think about this. If a human being can survive that, that's really hard to survive. This implies an endurance of 100. And so your safe zone is where you have an endurance of 100. Even though things are really, really hard and really, really bad, you know that. You lived through it every single day. You leveled up so well with inaction, with a sense of helplessness. These are familiar to you. And this is what's really crazy about human beings and animals in general. Life prefers that which it knows and can survive to that which is uncertain. The devil I know is way better than the devil I don't, right? And that makes sense from a survival standpoint. Even if this is bad, if I know how to survive this, I'm going to take that every time. And here's the other reason why people with trauma hate taking risks, hate putting themselves out there. So if I grow up in a world where my mom is bad, and my dad is bad, and I get bullied, and that's bad. So this is bad, bad, bad. What do I imagine the rest of the world is like? When my core caregiving figures, when the people who are supposed to look out to me are people who treat me like crap, what do I imagine? What prediction am I going to make about the rest of the world? My original parents abandoned me. My adopted parents told me I'm better off dead. What do you think the rest of the world is like? Right? When you go to a sewer and your first 3 handfuls of sewage smell like shit, are you going to keep looking for more? Of course not. This is why they do not have a fundamental belief that the world is a safe place. And if this is super dangerous, but I can survive this, I never want to leave. I never want to go out. It's not even worth it, because who knows what kind of terrible things are out there. If my mom and dad think this badly about me, imagine what it's like if I ever find an enemy. If this is my family, what are enemies supposed to be like? This is terrible. Y'all get this? This is incredibly logical. And this person's therapist is right. All roots back to abandonment. But rooting back to abandonment doesn't explain the layers at which this exists. So there is a fear of the unknown. There is a tendency towards inaction. There is a suppression and dissociation of internal experience. And this person says this, right? They say that if I explore the trauma, there's going to be a ton of pain. What's the point? To heal. I want y'all to understand this, okay? This is not about what the person says. This is about their brain. What experience does their brain have of healing? Healing is, if you've got core trauma, healing is something that happens to other people. How on earth is this brain supposed to value healing when it's never experienced it? When you get adopted, your parents are supposed to love you twice as much to compensate for the injury of adoption, from the injury of being given up. And when your parents hurt you way more, like, what are you supposed to do? No wonder you don't have sympathy for yourself, because you have no idea what that is. So I think you've got to abandon all the things that work for other people. But there's one axis that you need to move towards. The core problem here is that you still need what we call emotionally corrective experiences. Your brain needs new data. It needs a data of like, oh, I can heal. Like, here's a little bit of healing. Oh, cool, this is possible. It needs some degree of sympathy. Then you'll have sympathy for yourself if somebody else expresses sympathy for you, right? If you want to stop suppressing and dissociating, you have to do one of 2 things. Experience the fire and survive, or experience something good on the inside. And since we dissociate, we turn down the volume on everything, which makes it really hard to have good experiences, which makes it really good to have really winning emotional experiences. We can have dopaminergic experiences. Nucleus accumbens is completely intact. That's why we gravitate towards addiction instead of fulfillment. So what do? Move towards discomfort. When I work with people with core trauma, oftentimes what happens is they'll have opportunities for corrective experiences. But the corrective experiences don't feel bad. They feel really uncomfortable. When someone tells you that they love you, you feel uncomfortable. When someone tells you that you're doing a bad job, you feel bad, but you don't feel uncomfortable. You're comfortable with bad. That is the crux of the problem. And you are uncomfortable with good. This is the crux of the problem. And in order to have those corrective experiences from the rest of the world, what you need to do is be able to move towards discomfort, survive discomfort. So this is where I think that this is kind of like a mixed bag, but if you look at ashrams, so what you'll find is that if you look at like spiritual organizations, churches, cults, oftentimes very wounded human beings come there and they find solace. Now, this is sort of a double-edged sword, because when you look at these places like churches, religious places, meditation, communes, cults, whatever, these places are rife for predators who can prey on abused individuals. But that is, I want to say, the exception rather than the rule. Most places, like if you go to a meditation center, when I go to ashrams and things like that, like most people there are not abusive. And what I like about some of these centers, like a meditation center, for example, you got to be careful because the possibility of abuse is there and it attracts sociopaths who are looking for victims. So that's absolutely a very real risk. But there's something about a space where everyone is there and will basically be relatively accepting for your shit. There's no like real goal, right? So there's not like a performance aspect. There's not like an exchange aspect. It's not about like friendships can sometimes be hard because you have to like, you know, like there's some degree of reciprocity and connection, and that may be hard for you. Like a meditation center, and this is what I've just seen, you know, I realize now many years later that a lot of traumatized people will come there and they'll find healing. Because you show up every day and then you like meditate for a while and people make small talk. And this is really important. So if you have core trauma, one of the most healing things, the way to start healing, and this is going to be uncomfortable, is to have repetitive, neutral experiences. And meditation centers are great at this. It doesn't have to be a meditation center. I think other kinds of hobby-oriented things can be really good. But those come with their own problems like politics and things like that. So what you really want to seek out is experiences that make you uncomfortable. Things that make you feel bewildered, things that make you feel unsafe, but are not unsafe. This is where it's really cool because if we listen to this person, they're having all of these reactions, but their mind says, I should be sympathetic. So your mind is still intact. Your mind will hopefully be able to detect abuse, but recognize that what is good for you may feel uncomfortable, and what is bad for you will feel comfortable. So it's to move away from feeling good and bad to moving towards feeling comfortable and uncomfortable. And that starts with usually neutral, repeated experiences as best as you can find them. So join an art club, join a meditation center. This is what we also try to provide in therapy. So when you go and sit with a therapist, my goal, if I'm a therapist of someone with trauma, is that trauma is going to rear its ugly head. They're going to have fear of abandonment, be neutral. Compassionate, stable, neutral. And as you engage in this kind of stuff, your patterns will start to melt away a little bit. Your cognitions will become not quite as severe. Your reactivity will start to reduce. As your reactivity starts to reduce, your motivation will increase. Because remember that your action is to be still, is to freeze. And so as our reaction decreases, our action starts to change and we're no longer stuck being still. As I start to face those uncomfortable fears, that uncomfortable well of pain that is within you, and I tolerate that negativity a little bit, it becomes a little bit less scary. And the reason that this works is because in our cells, I really believe this. I don't think this is like scientifically, I can't give you all a source. But I think if we look at our human being at the level of the cell wants to heal. The level of the cell has a fundamental reparative mechanism. And that reparative mechanism, when it comes to our amygdala, when it comes to our social circuitry, all of these things are striving towards something. That's how you know fundamentally when something feels good or feels bad, right? We have all of these internal signals of hunger and thirst to help us alleviate that, to feel loved, to feel good about ourselves. Even though this is this person's experience, there's a part of their mind that says, this is not right, I need to change this. How do you even know? Because you don't even know what right is. You've never had an experience of it. That's because it's baked into your genetics. Last thing that I'll say is I built this trauma guide specifically to go through step by step of how to do this process. How to rewire your physiology first to reduce your autonomic instability, right? So your nervous system is calm. That will alter your emotions, because if your nervous system is calm, your emotions will change. If your emotions will change, your experiences start to change. If your experiences start to change, your emotions will alter your cognitions. Your cognitions will alter your experiences. Your experiences, as those start to change, will alter your identity. Your identity will alter your narrative. Those two things are linked. So from a step-by-step level, physiologic rewiring, emotional rewiring, rewiring of the brain, rewiring of the mind, rewiring of the identity. And that's how you heal at each of these steps. That's what's laid out in Dr. K's guide. And it's like hours and hours and hours of stuff, because each of those things deserves its own like hour or more, including exercises and stuff. But this is really common, right? Some people are just so messed up, but it's not really that they're messed up. It's that they've adapted to survive in a particular level of circumstances. You're not screwed. And the challenge is that you have been altered on so many levels, fundamental cognition, physiology, the way that you react to things, that it can feel overwhelming. And people will say, put yourself out there, find love, go to therapy, heal, uncover all of your emotions. They'll tell you to do all these things, have compassion for yourself, but those things are going to be inaccessible to you, which is totally fine. You can get there, but you can't start from like a neurotypical kind of place. Make sense? Someone saying like, yeah, put yourself out there is like, how? Exactly. Right? So putting yourself out there, it's about understanding that discomfort is the direction you need to go. It's not about just putting yourself out there. It is that discomfort makes you feel unsafe. But discomfort is where you will find the data that will alter the way that you see the world and the way that you live.
Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed today's video. We talk about a bunch of topics like this on the channel, so be sure to subscribe for more. If you're already subscribed, GG, and we'll see you in chat.